Yeah, g'day, Bruce. How you doing? Yeah. Look, could you put a call through to the Prime Minister, please? Wellington, I think. Yeah, I know it's a toll call, Bruce. That's why I rang you up. You're a tolls operator. Yeah. Muldoon, I think.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome to Checkpoint. That was, of course, John Clarke. Just before we go on tonight, if you have Sky TV, we're on it. This is a first for us and for RNZ. You can now watch us on Face TV, that's Sky Channel 83. We're also on Freeview Channel 50, Facebook, the RNZ website and the radio, as we have always been. Coming up, Andrew Little cleared in the Hagerman defamation suit, Edgecombe and the latest from there, including some pretty remarkable stories. More bad weather coming, I'm sorry to say, and much of the worst of it is going to the areas so hard hit over the past week or two, and we have much more tonight. But we begin with John Clarke, who gave us Fred Dagg and more, and who gave the Australians a more nuanced satire and held mirrors up to both nations and said, look, you silly buggers, this is how you are. He died yesterday. It was announced today while hiking in the Grampians National Park in Victoria. He was a brilliantly funny man and a loved one too, and he was part of the birth of something in New Zealand. Later, we'll be joined by Jeff Murphy, another man who was there at the time. But first, here's our reporter, Robin Martin.
Righto, kick it in the guts, Trev.
Gumboots, they are wonderful. Gumboots, they are swell.
A man of many talents, Clarke was a comedian, actor and writer of television, film and stage musicals. But for thousands of New Zealanders, he will always be the laconic farmer, Fred Dagg. His alter ego made his first appearance in 1973, and before long, the black singlet-clad, gumboot-wearing father of 7 boys, all called Trev, became a cultural icon.
I run the place with my sons. Of whom there are approximately half a dozen. Trevor here, he's the firstborn, and he's the eldest as a result of that. And he's a little thick, actually is Trevor, but a very, very valuable man indeed with cows.
Fellow comedian and good friend Tom Scott says Clarke's death comes as a terrible shock.
Yeah, I was going to catch up with him on the weekend, and I saw him, I had dinner with him a couple of months ago in Australia, and he was as funny and as kind and as wise as always. So it's a shock, terrible shock. And he was quite fit too, he did a lot of swimming.
Scott says Clarke had an amazing comedic timing.
He'd appear on stage at shows at downstage, and John would just walk out with a can of beer. He'd sit down, he'd take a suck on a cigarette, and he'd look at the audience for a while and go, story. And honestly, you'd bring the house down. He just had to say one word and we were in the palm of his hand.
Clarke left New Zealand for Australia and he went on to become a firm favourite across the ditch. He developed a regular political satire slot on A Current Affair, and for 27 years he appeared on the ABC, conducting mock interviews and skewering politicians with his comedy partner, Brian Dorr.
Scott Morrison, thanks for your time.
Good to be with you, Brian. Good evening.
I know you don't worry too much about the polls, but you are falling behind.
We don't worry too much about the polls, Brian, but I would expect the polls to improve anyway as these new proposed company tax cuts kick in.
Yeah, no, I read this week that the company tax cuts have passed this pub test.
Oh, yes, a ringing endorsement this week in the pub test, Brian.
How do you determine what passes the pub test?
Well, Malcolm Turnbull and I went to a pub, Brian, and we sought people's views. We said, what is your view of these proposed company tax cuts?
Who'd you ask?
Myself personally?
Yeah.
I asked Malcolm, Brian.
And who did Malcolm ask?
He asked me.
Clarke also co-wrote with Ross Stevenson the multi-award-winning mockumentary The Games about the Sydney Organising Committee for the Olympic Games, which aired in 1999 and 2000.
Hey, Mr Wilson, have you measured the 100 metres track?
Yes, of course.
Well, let me ask you, how long is it?
How long is the 100 metres track?
Yes.
It's a 100 metres track.
Yeah, I know what it is, Mr Wilson. I'm asking you how long it is.
It's about 100 metres.
It's about 100 metres long.
Yes.
How long should it be, Mr Wilson?
That's about the length it should be.
Yeah, about 100 metres long. Is the 200 metres track about 200 metres long?
Well, the 200 metres track is different.
Isn't it twice as long as the 100 metres?
Well, the 200 is different.
So, no, you've lost us, Mr Wilson.
Well, the 200 metres track is part of the 400 metres track.
Stevenson says it's a sad day for both Australia and New Zealand.
I imagine it's sombre in your country, and it's certainly sombre in ours, particularly in the city of Melbourne, which you love very much. And I was just thinking to myself that that famous scene from the Games should lead us to conclude that John Clarke died aged about 68.
Stevenson says Clarke was unrivalled in the English-speaking world.
He was such a genius. He knew always precisely what he wanted, precisely the way he wanted to say it. He was, in my view, for the greater part of his working life, to me, the greatest satirist in the English language. Wow. Don't worry about Australia. Don't worry about New Zealand.
No, the delegate from New Zealand, Mr. Fred Dagg.
John Clarke is survived by his wife Helen and daughters Lauren and Lucia. For Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tene.